welcome everyone to I Can't Stand Up, and it's a little bit of a mixture of first aid lesson and reflections really. I just want to introduce you before we start to Annie. When we started to use the smaller Annies, most of them went by the wayside, but I kept this one because when the students blow into her, she has a higher than usual incidence of blowing off, shall we say. So it always gets a cheap laugh. And she looks a bit like Donald Trump, I think. It's the hair, isn't it? So we'll get her out later on and have a little go. So a little bit about me to start with. For those of you who don't know me, I've been a volunteer first aider for 30 plus years now. No one ever gasps and says, God, you don't look old enough anymore. Those days are long gone. But I teach it as well, and really I suppose that my interest started when I was at primary school. There's a little local Red Cross unit, Red Cross Juniors. I didn't stick it for very long because it was run by one of the dinner ladies, and when you're a 8-year-old boy, you don't really want to be going along for a social evening with your dinner lady, do you? And she was a bit of a cow as well, which didn't help, so didn't last long. However, she wasn't actually the dinner lady who actually was the medical lady at the school. The medical lady, in inverted commas, I don't think she had any medical qualifications at all. I don't think she even had a first aid certificate, and if she did, she probably won it in a raffle or something, because the only thing she knew how to do, apart from a few words of sympathy, was administering Savlon. Now, some of you might remember Savlon. You can still get it, it's not kind of, but that was the treatment. So, grazed knees, cut hands, that sort of thing. Kiss it better, bit of Savlon, yeah. But that was all she could do. Even if you had a headache, you'd get a bit of Savlon rubbed on you. So, not a lot of use. The truth is, I think she was just a little bit too frail to be out on playground duty. So what they did, they sat her in a little porter cabin with a couple of bar electric in there, and that was her designation, if you like. And interestingly, it's amazing we all made it to adulthood actually. But we always tell our students now on the commercial courses, because they're workplace based, not to put things like Savlon in, not to have tablets and things in the kits. When I was temping a lot at the beginning of the end of the 90s, a lot of the companies I went to, if anyone needed a tablet, they went to see the office manager, because that was the person who tended to have them. There's a drawer in the desk. It's usually got some crunches in, for some reason. It's got popular chocolate. And then all the tablets are there. So aspirin, Rennie, antidepressants, whatever. That's where you go. You go to the office manager and you get your tablets. There is one time though when you're allowed to offer a tablet to someone. Do you know, as a first aider, one of you, or two of you, begins with A, and it's aspirin. So if you think someone's having a heart attack, you're allowed to offer them an aspirin. Yeah. They have to chew it, though. Works quicker if you chew it. And over the years, I have chewed an aspirin, and not because I needed it because of a heart attack, obviously, just bored, but I can assure you it doesn't really taste of anything particular. My drug is caffeine, as you could probably guess. I've got it all set up there so I can keep drip feeding myself with tea. When we do the mental health first aid course, one of the things that we mention is there's such a strong link between caffeine and anxiety and other things, and we get the students to tot up how many cups of tea and coffee they've had on the second day. So I give them a heads up on the first day, and I just say, keep a tally of how many teas and coffees you have, because tomorrow we'll be scoring it. and they usually get a few hundred or something. That's about the average. I said, don't worry, because whatever your score is, mine will be at least 4 times higher. And the highest scoring thing of all is filter coffee. And I am a bit of a stickler for filter coffee nowadays. So, the first time tea really came into things as an issue, many, many years ago. And one other thing you need to know, if you don't know already, I am a little bit of a hypochondriac. And when I'm not well, I'm very much the man and a very bad casualty, and I'll put my hand up to that. But I was in Chertsey, which is just up the road, doing a little bit of shopping. My eyesight went completely funny. I had halos of light round everything. I'd hit my head the week before on a shelf, and I now was under the distinct impression that my retinas were coming detached and I was going to go blind. So I went to St Peter's, which is luckily just up the road from Chertsey, in a bit of a flap. The nurse, eventually doctor, came over, had a look into my eyes with the ophthalmoscope thing, you know, not like a loving gaze. And they said, your eyes are absolutely fine. It's probably a migraine. Go home, sleep it off, go to your doctor in the week. And in those days, you could probably rock up at your GP and get an appointment that week. It's not like you have to sort of predict when you're going to be ill now, don't you, to get one. And he was an old school GP, you know, very formal, little reading glasses, etc. And he said, are you particularly stressed at the moment? Not really. What's your tea and coffee intake? How much do you have a day? So I just started off thinking, like, one when I get up, coffee, morning, cup of tea to wash that one down, another cup of tea. I was just totting up. I got to about 20 or 25, which is on average day. Sometimes it's more than that. I said, I don't know. I said about 20, 25 cups, mugs even. His eyes nearly popped out of his head. The trouble is, if you come off caffeine, you get terrible headaches. So I really didn't want to do that. So I just took a chance, and as it happens, I don't really get many migraines anymore, but I still drink just as much tea and coffee as I always did. So, students, right. In a minute, I'm going to give you a little name sticker. And I'll tell you why, just so you can get involved, maybe. I've got a marker pen around somewhere, I think, there it is. I had one girl called Nikki, who was a lovely girl, and I couldn't get it out of my head that she was called Nancy. And she was very into John Donne, who was a poet, and we got chatting and stuff. I still couldn't get it out of my head. I kept calling her Nancy. Now, at the end of the course, in case you're wondering what this beanie cat was, she got me a little beanie cat, and she got a little goth choker, put it on the cat, and made a little name badge. It says Nancy, the goth cat, which was very sweet, and luckily I don't think she minded that I couldn't get her name right for the 3 days. And so there's Nancy, very sweet. I don't usually get presents from students. Occasionally I get the odd box of chocolates. It's very nice, obviously. That's my one and only beanie that I've ever got for a student. Probably every month or so, you know, you get the clap, you know, the standing ovation, the round of applause, that is, not the but to get something nice like that, and that's about 15 years ago, and I kept her on the windowsill the whole time. That's why her bum's gone a bit purple, because of the sun, and you know, the black's faded a little bit. But what I want you to do is write your name on this sticker, and then you can take it and stick it somewhere where I can see it. And And then maybe, if any of you want to join in with anything later, you'll have the chance. But I won't force anyone to do it because not everyone likes joining in with things. But you have an option. So, lovely little lesson plan here. Joke for the trainers to my lesson plan, just to make sure I don't miss anything. Don't think that would score very highly, really, would it? So, let's put it out to you, a quick question. What do you think is really important about having a good first aider? To be a good first aider? Clean? Hygienic? You know, I don't mind if my first aider's dressed as a gorilla, as long as they are clean. That is fine by me. Now, usually I go up to London for Christmas shopping. I didn't this year because I've been up to London so much work-wise. I actually had got a bit fed up of London, so I went to Kingston this year. In the old days, I never used to go to London at work. I was hardly ever there. So it was a novelty. I used to go up to London, do my Christmas shopping. I'd usually been off for a few days by the time I went up to London. So I just get up in the morning, have a wash, have some breakfast, chuck on a few clothes, whatever was kicking around, and I'd just go up to London. I'd take a rucksack, and in there I had a flask of boiling water, some milk, mug, tea bags. For some reason, I was a bit... Nowadays I just go into Pret with my disposable cup and have a cup of tea. But in those days I tended to bring my own supplies. And midway through the shopping trip, I had decided that it was time I had a rest. So I went and sat on a doorstep to a block of flats above some shops in Oxford Street. I took my rucksack off, made my drink, and as I sat there drinking it, I could feel something land in my lap. And of course I thought it was just a pigeon pooing on me or something. When I looked down, someone had actually chucked a £1 coin at me. Now, some people might have been affronted by that, but I thought it was quite amusing. And I just thought, I wonder how long I'm going to sit here until I earn enough money to offset what I spent on the Christmas shopping. But I didn't do that because it's a bit unethical, really, isn't it? But as I say, as long as they're clean, it's fine by me. What we're going to start with on the course is the primary survey. I've brought Annie along. I'm going to take a slight liberty so you can all see. I'm going to do my primary survey on Annie and she's going to be on the table. But we don't normally lift our casualties up and put them on a table. That would be a bit difficult, really. And one thing some trainers do on the course is to make sure they can see the students are checking for danger, they get them to do what they call the jazz hands. So if you've got 12 people dotted around a room and you want to see if they're checking for danger, they go jazz hands. Now the trouble is, you don't want them getting into the habit of doing that for real, because if you come up to someone in the middle of the shopping centre and you go, checking for danger, people think you're a bit weird. So, just do your check for danger, but don't do any miming or anything like that. As for gloves, one thing we used to do on the primary survey, we used to ask the first aiders to pat people down to feel for blood and wet patches. Now we don't do that anymore because it was never really part of the survey anyway, it just kind of crept in. Yeah. And if you're not with gloves, you don't really want to be feeling strangers up to see if there's a wet patch that you haven't discovered. You know, that would be a bit yucky. So it's quite good, isn't it? And to be honest, if there's a wet patch or a bleed that's bad enough to worry about, you will see it, won't you? You don't have to worry about feeling for it. Gloves. There is a make of glove. They're purple gloves, they're called purple gloves, they are purple. But they are slightly longer, which keeps the body fluids off your wrist. When I say longer, obviously not veterinarian. You know, you're not going to shove it up a cow's bum. But those couple of extra inches really do make a difference. Maybe I should rephrase that a bit more. So if you've got gloves, wear them. If you haven't, don't worry about it. But what we need to know about our casualty is, are they alive? That's the bottom line, isn't it? Are they alive? Yeah? So, first thing, if I walked over to Annie and I said, hello Annie, are you okay? And she says, yes Rob, I'd be a bit freaked out, I think. I don't think she's going to do that. But if you approach someone, as long as it's safe, do call out to them first. Yes, make sure that they are responsive. If they don't respond first time, don't worry, you can shout commands at them, you can even tap them or gently shake the shoulders, gently, okay, before you worry. But obviously if they're unresponsive, if they're on their back, they will have a problem. Because I don't know if you know, when you're unresponsive, your tongue blocks your airway. It drops to the back of your mouth and blocks the airway. Luckily it's easy to shift. We can do it with one move. A lot of students put the hand around the throat, so whether they're thinking of a colleague they don't like, or the mother-in-law or whatever, I don't know. But that will not move the tongue. How will that do it? What do you do instead? You just get your two fingers, do your scout sonner or whatever it's called, tilt and lift. That's all you need to do to lift the tongue and open an airway. Now, obviously we're going to check the breathing. Yeah. There's a thing in first aid, they like the number 10. Most things are 10 minutes, except for this. Because if you're down here, we get very close when we check the breathing, you know. We're about an inch away from their mouth, if that, we're staring down at their chest and tummy. If you are still saying after 10 minutes that you haven't been able to find out whether they're breathing or not, either you're not cut out for first aid or you really like the view. 10 seconds should be long enough. Yeah? As long as they're breathing, that's fine. Just look for any wet patches or bleeding and then you can do what you do. Okay? So, that is basically step one. You need to know where you stand. What do you think you're going to do to a casualty, an injured person, if they are talking to you, just to find out a little bit more about them? Questions. Just chat to them, you know, just talk to them. Are you okay? What have you done? Where does it hurt? All that sort of thing. Be careful what you say though, you have to say it in the right way. So a good example is we might need to know who to call on their behalf, you know, to tell them there's been an accident. You might say something like, is there anyone you'd like us to call? That'd be alright, wouldn't it? Probably if you said, who's your next of kin? They're going to start thinking, oh, that sounds a bit heavy. So we're not going to use that phrase. We're not going to ask them if they want a priest. We're just going to ask them if they need help getting home, or is there anything we can do for them, or would you like to get an ambulance for them, or whatever. Now, talking about people who don't want help. This is your chance to do a bit of diagnosis now. So, I'll set the scene, and as we go along, you can have a go at guessing what's wrong, right? So this is a football tournament over a weekend. On the second day, we were sitting outside the ambulance having a bacon sandwich and a cup of tea, just chatting, about 9:30 in the morning. And there were dads kicking, you know, having a kick around with their sons, practicing for the game. And one of them was like this, coming towards us. And he was looking straight at us, so I thought, right, he's going to come. For some reason, it was my turn. So stuffed the rest of my bacon sandwich down my gullet as quickly as possible, got ready to receive. Now, if you had a casualty at a football tournament coming towards you like that, what would you reckon? Especially as they've been practicing and warming up, kicking and dribbling and stuff.
Sprained ankle.
Sprained ankle. Hold that thought. He got as far as the ambulance and he said, "Can I ask you something? It is a bit embarrassing." And this is the moment when we realised this was not a sprained ankle. So we said, yes, of course, have a seat, you know. So he went up the ramp onto the ambulance and sat down really, really with difficulty. Anyone got any ideas now?
Piles.
Now, we all thought it was piles. I thought it was piles. I mean, a lot of people have had piles. I've had piles. Yeah, I've had doctor's finger up my bum, you know, all that. And they still talk about it at the pub. But this guy proceeded to tell us about his toilet business in horrible detail, but we still aren't allowed to say, "You've got piles," because obviously it could be more serious. So we offered him 3 options. Number 1, hospital. Get checked out. Go to hospital, get checked out. Do you want us to take you to hospital? Don't want to go to hospital. Don't like hospitals. Okay. Not everyone likes hospitals, fair enough. Second thing, why don't you go to the walk-in centre and have a chat to one of the nurses? He said, "Well, it's still a hospital, isn't it?" Well, not really, but okay. The only other option, I don't know what he thought we were going to do, the only other option was to say, go to the chemist, have a chat with the pharmacist, and I'm sure that he or she will give you some cream or whatever and sort you out. Now, he grudgingly went away at this point and said he would go to the pharmacy. But because he'd been so reluctant, we needed to make sure it wasn't going to be a disaster and come back and bite us on the bum. Yeah. So we made lots of notes about the guy and the fact he'd refused treatment and what we told him and everything, and hope for the best. But it probably was piles. Yeah, we're pretty sure of that. Now, before we do another little bit of diagnosis, let me introduce you to Annie as Annie. Here she is, the Donald. Do you want to hear a Donald Trump joke? Oh, good, because you're going to. Well, you know what he's like. He's a bit of a liability, isn't he? So whenever he goes to a big event, like G27 or whatever, he sends his daughter on ahead as a sort of charm offensive. So she gets there, she goes up to the guy who's announcing the names, and she says, "I'm Ivanka." And he turns around and says, "Your dad certainly is." What you do, though, is very simple, assuming they're not breathing, obviously. If you blew into them when they were breathing, they'd probably throw up on you, which would be very nice. They've kept it really simple. The people who lay down the law are the UK Resuscitation Council. And for quite a long time now, they have said that you don't have to do mouth to mouth if you're untrained, or you're unwilling, or you're unable. But the pumping of the chest circulates the blood and oxygen, and that's why if you can't do the mouth to mouth, we'd rather you just do the compressions of the chest rather than nothing at all. Make sense? So, we need to find out where the heart is. They used to mess around, 2 fingers from here, there, all that. We don't bother doing that anymore. We just plonk our hands in the middle of the chest. Trouble is, a lot of people come on the first aid courses, they've seen casualty, and they're doing this. When we do it on a person, we keep our arms absolutely straight, so we know that when we push down, we're actually pushing down on the person and not just doing the funky chicken. And the other thing that people worry about is getting the depth right and the speed right. So, maybe some of you know about Staying Alive. Get the song in your head and it will work just fine. The speed that you're allowed to do it at is between 100 and 120. So anything from Nellie the Elephant to the Archers will work very well. We still get some people who go a bit mad. They go this. The heart hasn't got a slightest chance of responding to that sort of speed. I had someone the other week literally going, I said, slow down. Think more of a disco, not a rave, because it feels and I always get visions of a little dog on the leg doing this when people go too fast. You know what I mean? But 120 is nice, steady, boom, 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 boom. Yeah? If any of you have ever been kept awake in a hotel room by the guests in the next room, you'll know it is headboard speed. Well, however you choose to remember it, get it right, because if you do the right speed, you will maximise the efficiency. Yeah? So, this is where you put your hands, but I'm going to have to go on the floor. I won't be able to do it otherwise, just so you know where you're going. Now, in a minute, you're going to hear Annie's chest thumping away. Okay? But my hands are in the middle of the chest. And that's the sort of speed. Tip the head back a little bit, do your breaths. Now, if you want to breathe in, just remember, pinch the nose, blow into the mouth, and you can see out of the corner of your eye if the chest goes up. You watch. Yeah? And then you're back on the chest again. So as long as you can remember that it's 30 compressions and 2 breaths, and you can do them roughly at the right speed and the right sort of depth, you'll be all right. How hard do you think I was pushing on Annie to make Annie go boom? A couple of inches? 2 and a bit inches. 5 to 6 centimetres. That's quite a lot, isn't it? You have to push quite hard. But remember, when you're unresponsive, you're quite saggy, so it's not going to be too difficult to get that depth. Now, if you're lucky enough to have a defibrillator as well, then again, feel free to use it. It's there for you to use. Some people are a bit scared of them because they're used to the big things in casualty with the paddles and everything, but you don't need to be. They're little boxes about the size of a lunchbox with 2 pads, which basically just stick on the chest, and then if they need shocks, they get shocks. If they don't, they don't. But the machine knows what to do. The only thing you need to know is if you've taken your casualty's clothes off and they've got a hairy chest, you may need to shave the bits where the pads go, because it doesn't stick very well to hairy chest. A little bit of hair is not a problem. We're talking like the Austin Powers love rug kind of hair. And it's only the bits where the pads go, and it's only a dry shave. You haven't got time to mess around. Just there and there. Then you can stick the pads on. Yeah? And it shows you on the pads where to stick the pads. So there's a picture on each pad to show you where to stick the pads. And remember, if you've got that machine, you can just combine the use of that with resus. What it does, it sort of reboots the heart. You know, when your heart's not beating properly, it can kind of quiver and shake. It kind of gets out of sync. It's like a computer when all the screens are on, but you can't do anything. You know, you type stuff and nothing comes up on the screen. Yeah, you know what I mean? So what's the old IT trick? What do? Switch it off, switch it on again. That's what defibrillators do. They switch off the heart and it switches itself back on again, and hopefully sorts itself out. The success rate with defibrillators is very good. It could be as good as about 80%, and that's probably because, unlike our laptops, our hearts don't run on Windows 10. So you've got to reasonable chance of getting something sorted there. Just remember the basics, compressions and breaths, yeah, very simple. Now, let me give you a little example of something we dealt with on duty, which will lead us very nicely into bleeding. It was actually just over the road. We do a duty every year. It's called the Sunbury Regatta. It's a family day with fireworks in the evening. They have the bar stalls out all day. Someone went into the bushes for a wee, stepped on a broken or rotten branch and fell forward and landed on a nail on a fence that was flat in the ditch. You know, it had big nails sticking out, and luckily, you know what I mean, only one of them actually went through his hand. He missed the other one. Considering going into the bushes for a week, it could have been a lot worse, couldn't it? So anyway, we heard the shouting and screaming. We went over there. We said, has an ambulance been called? His mate said yes. So we just hitched his trousers up, make him decent. Yeah. And then 2 fire trucks rock up. This is the road, so you know how narrow that road is. They had generator. Each crew had a generator. Those big cutter things that they use to cut cars up and stuff. Floodlights with the battery bases, you know what I mean? So in the bushes now we have 2 fire crews, 4 floodlights, generators and cutting equipment. And they're all quite excited because they like playing with their toys. Then the ambulance crew turns up, they take one look and go, put it away. And they just lift his hand off the nail. And although he had a hole in his hand, because it was there, it missed all the blood vessels, you know. So they bandaged his hand up, took him off to hospital. Fire crew went, oh. Put all their stuff away, kind of cleared off. 20 minutes later, it was like nothing ever happened. But just for that brief time, with all the floodlights and everything in the bushes, it was a bit like being on a film set or something like that. It's quite dramatic. If someone does get something stuck in them, their instinct will be to yank it out, we find. The number of people we've gone to help who've already done that before we arrive, you would not believe. If it ever happens to you, don't pull the thing out, just leave it in. We bandage around it, we support it. Go to hospital. The nurses are well used to removing things from various bits of people. And they will do it without a fuss. The only time the bandaging is slightly different to the normal is if you have an amputation. So this is where you cut a bit off yourself. In the home, when is it most likely to happen? Probably in the garage with machinery, or maybe in the kitchen chopping up the chicken or the vegetables or whatever. Yeah? Now, quick question. If that happened and you were there, what would your instinct tell you to do? Would it be to pick up the bit and wrap it up and all that, or actually deal with the casualty? Deal with the casualty. Absolutely right, yeah. Obviously, if the bit was lying around on the kitchen floor, we would pick it up. You put it on the worktop or something. You don't want it getting stepped on, or kicked, or eaten by the dog. They're already in a panic. You imagine all the neighbours are hearing is this whoever it is bloke running around next door shouting, "Ah, my finger's in the dog!" They're thinking, we can get arrested for that. You just want to deal with the bleeding at the stump, that's all. Little bandage, nothing textbook, just functional. But how you wrap the bit up is very important. We're going to wrap it in. The best thing is cling film. Most kitchens have cling film, don't they? Wrap it in a bit of cling film, put it in a clean food bag, get a plastic glove out, drop it into the glove. It may not fit into any of the finger holes. That's not it. Then you wrap it in a bit of cloth, you put it in a bag of ice, and you label it so no one mistakes it for anything they shouldn't be mistaking it for. What do we write on the label? Owner's name, name of bit, when it came off, that's quite helpful. Tell the ambulance crew it's an amputation. When they arrive, hand them over, or if you're driving them to hospital, make sure that the bit and the patient are handed over together. We don't want the bit sent in the post, it has to get there with the patient. But somewhere in the world, pretty well every body part has been reattached successfully. So the odds are very good, you will get it back. Even willies. I mean, I don't know if any of you are old enough to remember the Bobbitt case, but for those of you who aren't, his wife found out he'd been cheating on her quite a lot and cut his willy off. And apparently the story goes that she drove off with it and chucked it out the car window. There's a joke going around that it hit the windscreen of the couple's car coming the other way, and the old boy turned to his wife and said, "Oh, look at the size of the knob on that mosquito." Whether it's true or not, who knows? But they sent the highway patrol out with the dogs, and they found it, and they put it back. She got a suspended sentence because it was like it was extenuating circumstances. You know, she was provoked, kind of thing. He did some porn films, so it obviously worked. She found a new love, who presumably slept on his front, and all ended happily. Now with the bleeding, I expect you know the basics, don't you? What do you do to stop something bleeding? If you cut yourself, you just do it instinctively, don't you? What do you do? Bit of pressure? Mm-hmm. If you press very hard on the wound with something, it should start to slow down a little bit and hopefully clot. That's what normally happens. If you're on warfarin, it probably won't happen very quickly, but it will at least reduce the bleeding, and then hopefully the ambulance crew, they have fancy things they can use to stop bleeding that we can't use. We can go up to 2 bandages, up to 2. And that's the maximum we're allowed to do. So we put one of these on, we put another one on top, and that's pretty much it. Plus we usually lie them down before they fall down, and we call an ambulance. If you did use, are you aware of a tourniquet? Do you know what tourniquets are? It's when you tie a tight band at the top of a limb. Yeah. If you do that and they lose their arm or something, you would really be in a lot of trouble, because in this country, unless you're trained to use them like soldiers and things, we mustn't use them because there is an inherent danger in depriving a whole limb of blood flow. But the ambulance crew might use something like that, and I think they're called hemostatic dressings. They're special dressings that stop bleeding that we also don't use, but they use them in the army and things as well. But yeah, normal bleeding, a nice firm bandage or 2 will do, and I'll just show you how to do that in a minute. Just remember how to wrap up the amputated part if there's an amputation, and not to pull embedded objects out. And if they have pulled it out, don't put it back. You just have to tell them not to do it again. So, volunteer, just come up. I'll just show you how to do this, and then you'll get the basics. There we go. Right.
Do you need your chair?
There. You can bring your chair. Put it away. Just bandage your arm. Let's imagine Claire's cut her arm. I mean, it might be spurting bright red blood everywhere if she's cut an artery, but hopefully it'll just be more like plummy red and just like running out, not spurting everywhere. And the only thing is, as you go round and round, you put the pad on the wound and you go round and round. You just have to apply a little bit of pressure as you go. Otherwise it ends up so loose, it's no use. I always pretend I'm turning a heavy wheel or something. Just to, yeah. Then you get to your 2 ends and you just pull them and tie them, and that's it. So it's very, very easy. How do I know if that's too tight, apart from Claire going, "Oh, it's too tight"? But she hasn't whinged, so I guess it's all right. Are you happy with that?
Yeah.
Good. Oh, the little pulse thing came off on your wrist. So it must be quite tight. Signs to look out for, obviously bulging veins, difference in colour between the hands, in this case, tingling feeling. Oh look, her nails have gone blue. But then they go to hospital and the hospital will sort it out. You don't need to call an ambulance all the time for bleeding, it just depends how bad it is and so on. It's the same for burns, broken bones, thank you. You can usually take people in a car. In fact, sometimes you phone the ambulance people up and they tell you to. The only other thing you might come across really is a burn, so probably just a good idea to mention burns. How do you treat a burn? Well, obviously when you burn yourself, you cook your skin, don't you? So you need to cool it down. And if you think about the magic number, how long? 10 minutes. Cool it for 10 minutes or longer. Cover it with cling film. Hospital if you're worried. If it's big or deep or in particular places, we tend to worry a little bit more. If it's just a burnt finger on a barbecue tong or something, it's not really a big deal. They can go to hospital if they're worried, but it's really not necessary. Just honestly, the best thing is just cold water, cold running water. But if you want to keep the cooling going, you can get sachets of burn gel, which you can put on the top, which will continue the cooling for longer. So if you're going to hospital, you might find that quite helpful. It's aloe vera gel. There's a lot of aloe vera gel and water in it, which is lovely and soothing, and a tiny bit of tea tree oil, about 1% tea tree oil. Very nice. I've used them on myself and they've worked a treat. I was in Epsom walking to a course one evening, black coffee because I'd forgotten my goat's milk, missed the curb, and of course I had the lid off so it cooled down quicker, went all over the back of my hand. So unable to wash it off even, I literally just had a sachet in my pocket and I just squirted it on my hand. The coffee was still there, all sticky and everything. Smoothed it in. Went to the venue, delivered the course, went home, washed it all off. But there was no damage at all, no pain at all, and actually the second I put the gel on, the pain just disappeared. It was amazing. So I'm a big fan. There are a few body parts, obviously, which need a bit of extra TLC. A colleague and I once had to treat someone at work who got a coffee in their lap. That's the usual cause of genital burns, unless you're, lying naked on a photocopier for a long time, or playing with your hair straighteners or whatever. Usually just hot drinks, isn't it? Now his PA called for me, because I was the first aider, and asked me to take him into the gents to cool his bits, and I said, I'm not going into the gents with him on my own, you can forget that, you're coming with me. So we both took him into the gents and splashed his bits as much as possible, because it's a bit hard to put them in a basin really, And he had to get his clothes off, because you get hot liquids on your clothes, it soaks in, doesn't it? So jacket round middle, pants and trousers round ankles, hobbles to toilet. Lots of splashing of genitals. He goes off to hospital. We did not attempt to wrap cling film round his genitals. I think that would have been a little bit of a challenge. And obviously we're not going to wrap cling film around anyone's face, are we? I hope. Not unless you've got lots of holes in it. Now, just one more little scenario for you. If you get this one right, I'll be very impressed. Right? So we had a call to a man who had severe chest pain, was pale, sweaty, over 50, and a little bit overweight. What do you think? It was quite bad central chest pain. It was kind of spreading.
Heart attack.
You would think, wouldn't you, heart attack? I would say if you get anyone with severe chest pain who is very sweaty and pale and short of breath, you do treat it as a heart attack. We called the ambulance, we brought the oxygen, we brought the defibrillator, we brought everything. The ambulance arrived and they did what we couldn't do because we didn't have one or the people qualified with us at the time. They do an ECG. They put leads on your chest and they see what your heart's doing. It was a normal trace. It was fast because he was in pain, but it was regular. So they said, there's nothing wrong with your heart, mate, but there's something wrong because you're obviously in a lot of pain. Let's get you off the hospital and see what's going on. Now, normally, we would not find out what happens to someone who we don't know that we treat as at an event or on the street, because it's not our business, is it? It's very frustrating because you want to know. When you do them often enough, you tend to bump into the same ambulance crews, from time to time. So, we bumped into this ambulance crew on another event. They'd stopped off to have a burger. They came over and had a chat. We just caught up, said, oh, hello, blah, 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 how are you, sort of thing. And then thought, oh, you dealt with that chap with the chest pain. I said, was he all right, Oh, yes, he was fine. They took him to hospital and sorted it all out. Are you allowed to tell us what was wrong with him? Well, he had a swollen abdomen. When they got to hospital, he was very distended. It was wind. It was pressing on the diaphragm and causing the chest pain. I don't know the details of why he had such a lot of trapped wind. They're probably not going to tell us that. But he was okay, and that was the main thing. We kind of thought possibly it might be, and we sort of vaguely hoped that if they took a speed bump a bit fast, they might have deflated him on the route to the hospital. But at least he was all right. But apparently, this is quite common. We'd never come across it before. They're known as fart attacks, apparently. So I'm told by one or two of my ambulance-y colleagues. I don't think that's the official term for them. But it was interesting, and it just proves that sometimes you never completely know what you're getting involved with. Interesting, though. The very last thing is just to tell you how to roll someone safely onto their side. We call it the recovery position. If you can't remember which leg to put where, don't worry. The main thing is, if someone is lying on their back, they are very vulnerable, especially if they're sick, because they could breathe it in or choke on it. We very often roll people onto their side, so if they're sick, the sick will come out and it won't cause them to breathe it in or swallow it or choke on it. We do it with people who are very drunk, we do it with people who've been poisoned or are very groggy or we think might throw up. We roll people onto their side when they're resuscitated successfully, because they usually start to throw up when they start to breathe. It's quite easy to do. The only thing I would say is, if you're able to, if you've got enough time, pat the pocket that you're going to roll them onto, because if you're lying on a bunch of keys or something, it can be quite uncomfortable. And a lot of people think that just because someone's passed out, they don't know what's going on, but they do. So you think, oh good, the colleague's unconscious, I can slag them off. No, you can't. And if you take anything out of their pocket, you must tell them that you're just taking it out of their pocket so it doesn't hurt them when you roll them over. Then they know you're not nicking their car keys or whatever. Hopefully they won't have a lot of things in their pockets. We do get the odd, call them Tomb Raider pockets, where you sort of have a big pocket full of all sorts of stuff, old sandwiches and old hankies and keys and a budgie and whatever. All sorts of things in there. But most people have little or nothing in their pockets. Glasses, again, take them off if you can remember, because you don't want to roll them onto their glasses and break the glasses. But the idea is that they should be rolled onto their side. Now I'm just going to move this table back because we finished with Annie. If anyone wants to lie down on their back, I will show you how to do it.
Sorry, it's my job.
Oh, okay. No frills, because I'm just going to do it quickly. So, we like you to roll them towards you because it's safer. You can stop them rolling onto their face if they come towards you. Do you agree? One arm goes out to the side. If you remember, everything comes towards you, you won't go wrong. That comes towards you as well. Whoops. Should have turned your ring round.
I just did it.
Oh, well done. And then you pull, and they come over. Simple as that. Just a little adjustment once they're over, just to make them comfortable. There you go. Now you can see how they would now not be able to roll either way because the leg blocks the roll. Sit comes out, chest is off the ground, breathing is easy. She's quite safe like that. I'll just sit there and keep an eye on her and talk to her and so on. Probably cover her up with a coat as well. Thank you, Claire. I'd use someone else's coat usually because obviously if they wee themselves it might go all over my coat, but that's what you need, just to cover them up with a coat. And we get when people come back after 3 years to requalify as first aiders, to be honest, most of them have nothing to report. They've done no first aid in the 3 years. 1 or 2 people attract carnage and they come back with stories of heart attacks and seizures and heavens knows what else. Some people seem to attract that sort of thing. I'm quite good at the faces, even though I'm not very good at the names. If you have a particularly gorgeous student or something, you'll probably remember the name. But you also think about the characters. I had a maths professor on a course and I remembered him. 2 years later he walked past me in Staines High Street when I was outside Smith's collecting. That was the same time I was asked to sit a collie. Someone said, would you look after my dog when I go shopping in Smith's or whatever? Yeah, collies, I don't mind collies. I'm a bit scared of dogs, but it was all right. Honestly, I got more money in the 20 minutes I was standing there with this dog than the 2 hours I'd been there before. Dogs and kids, they're magnets for money. We usually get asked where the toilets are at an event, but we also get asked to look after bikes, dogs and kids. Yeah. And I said, hello, Professor. How are things at university? He just looked at me, completely stunned. He was trying to work out where he saw me. And I put him out of his misery. Not literally, because and I said, oh, I taught you first aid at Ashford a couple of years ago. Do you remember? He said, oh yeah, Richard. I wasn't rude enough to put him right. I often get called Richard. People think I'm Richard. I don't know why. But I just sort of chatted to him a bit. And he walked on. He probably thought I had a superb memory, but the truth is, if you'd seen the guy, you would not have forgotten him. You know your classic mad professor, wild curly hair, big glasses, big moth-eaten jumper with elbow patches and a pen round his neck on a string. You know, you couldn't have been more stereotypical if you tried. He was a very nice chap. There aren't many people I meet teaching them that I really don't want to see again. We had one guy with a terrible attitude who was a forklift driver who had to be thrown off the course because he was so belligerent and he wouldn't join in with anything and he couldn't be assessed on anything, and he didn't even seem bothered that he'd have to tell his boss he'd been slung off the course. You know Lauren, Catherine Tate character? He was just like her. Just comes in, sits down like this, not bothered, not joining in. Go away then. You know, I think most of them were quite happy to see the back of this guy. But most people do come because they want to. I mean, we don't get a lot of conscripts, and normally you can turn the conscripts around. By the end of the course, they say, I didn't want to come, I was sent, but I'm glad I did, you know. And then we tell them you can use this skill in your home life, you know, not just for work. You got any kids? Oh yeah, well there you go then, you know. So it is a good thing to know. And there's loads of first aid courses around, so if you wanted to do a whole first aid course, you can do 1 day, 2 day, 3 day. You learn a lot. You get your hands on, you do a lot of practical stuff, even more now than you did before. They used to teach you a lot of stuff we don't bother teaching you now because it's stuff you don't need to know. You know, like what broken bones look like under the skin and stuff, because you're not going to know, are you? You can't see, you haven't got x-ray vision, or maybe you have, but most people haven't. And so they've given you more time now to practice skills. I mean, you get 3 days on a long course. We had an hour. There's no way you're all going to get your hands on everything in that time. But it's something to think about, isn't it? How useful first aid can be. So again, the main thing is just remember, any blood coming out, stop it. Anyone who's unresponsive, drunk, or you don't know what to do with them, put them in the recovery position because you'll keep them safe. and as long as they're on their side, everything will just flop into place pretty much anyway. Yeah. You do often find people who pass out, though, are in inaccessible places, and usually it's toilets. And if you go into a toilet to throw up, number one, don't shut yourself in, because people do, because they're embarrassed, because then the doors open inwards and we can't get you. Yeah. Some doors open outwards. I have seen some that open outwards. There was a foot sticking out of a door at Waterloo when I went there once, when the Eurostar used to go from Waterloo, and I had to get the toilet attendant. We had to get this guy out. I still caught my train, luckily. And I'm quite slim, so I can climb into toilet cubicles without too much problem. I mean, I don't make a habit of it, you understand. If I have to, I can. But don't ever shut yourself in, because it's a real nightmare to get them out. He had to get a maintenance man to take the doors off, and it was a nightmare. And he was just very drunk, this guy, very drunk. But it does happen. I'm sure it happened a lot at New Year. I've only done the odd New Year duty, and it's not something I really like. Sitting there nursing, vomiting, party goers at 3 a.m. isn't really my idea of seeing the New Year in a nice way, but there you go. Okay. Well, I hope you've learned a little bit of first aid and you feel a little bit more confident about doing some. Thank you for being a good audience and coming along on a cold day with your coughs and colds and whatever else. I do appreciate it. I'll be here for a little while just clearing up, so if anyone wants to ask anything privately or just catch up, I'd be very happy to do that. So have a nice New Year and a safe drive home, and thank you very much. I Can't Stand Up was written and performed by Rob Chantler. It was produced and directed for radio by Victoria Lawrence and was a free theatre company production.